Ever since I got interested in photography, one of the things I wanted to do the most was to photograph the Milky Way. At the time I was so naive and I thought that you needed the biggest sensor camera, the biggest lens with the widest opening that you could get. So I hit up Google, only to be brought down to tears when I realized that the price of this professional photography equipment was ridiculous. I mean, seriously, a 1.0 lens is like 4 to 5 grand, and the Canon 1DX Mark II says get the fuck out. But luckily, we don't need any of that. The only thing that you really need is a decent camera with manual controls, a tripod, a really dark sky, and a sprinkle of editing. Now, before I get ahead of myself, I do have to state that yes, higher end equipment does yield better overall quality, and there are many talented people that make a living out of photographing the night sky, and in that situation, it's more of a tool. For what we're doing, we're just getting started. You don't really need it. If you have it, great for you, but not required. Also, I want to mention that not everyone's definition of budget or low cost is the same. So what may be true for one person, not necessarily for another. And I understand that. Just keep that in mind as we move forward. Now on to it. Like I previously stated, you're going to need a camera that gives you manual control. This can be a DSLR, old and new, a mirrorless camera, a high-end point and shoot. For me, I have a Canon T5i or a 700D, as is known in the international market. But there are other selections from other brands such as Sony, Nikon, Panasonic, and so forth. That is your homework, not mine. As far as lenses, you can get away with whatever kit comes with your camera because they are wide enough and they have decent aperture. And what they lack in aperture, you can make up for it with a longer exposure. This is where I have to introduce you to the 500 rule. Bear with me for just a second, it's only a little bit of math. So you need to take the focal length of your lens. In this case, 18 millimeters in the kit lens. 500 divided by 18 millimeters gives you 27.7. According to this arbitrary rule, the result, 27.7, is the maximum amount of seconds that you can set your exposure without getting noticeable star streaking at 18 millimeters. If your lens is 35 millimeters, you repeat the equation. 500 divided by 35 gives you a maximum exposure time of 14.2 seconds before noticeable star streaking occurs. Does it work? Yeah? Follow it. Enough said. I'll probably get back to it at the end. Put your camera into manual mode. Also, if the lens you're using has image stabilization, turn that off. Autofocus, turn that off. We're going to be manually focusing. Set your lens to the widest focal length. Open the aperture as wide as possible. Set your profile to neutral. Set your camera to a 2-second delay once you press the shutter button. This will prevent your hands from shaking the camera and getting a blurry image right off the bat. Set your ISO to around 3200 and your exposure to 15 seconds. These are the settings we're going to use to start out. Now that your camera is all set up, let me teach you about light pollution and planning your shot. If you live near a city, you won't be able to capture the Milky Way because the lights originating from the city or your own neighborhood are going to overwhelm the sky around you and you won't have a dark sky. Also, if the moon is out, it will overwhelm the sky because the moon acts as a giant light reflector. That's why when the moon is out, you don't see as many stars as when it's not. To check out the light pollution in your area, I recommend a great resource online is lightpollutionmap.info. You look up your area and you see where you can go and take pictures of the night sky. As long as you're not in the red, you should be able to get a decent image, even if you're in the yellow. There are many applications for tracking the moon, but the one that I like the most is StartChart app. It allows you to use your smartphone as a viewfinder to track celestial objects in the night sky, including the Milky Way. It also allows you to input a time and a date, and you will see where all of the celestial bodies are supposed to be in relation to that date. Because the moon acts as a giant light reflector, you don't want to shoot when the moon is in any of its phases except for new moon or if it's above the horizon. You want to shoot when the moon is below the horizon so that it doesn't skew the night sky. Now that you plan everything perfectly, hope that the weather cooperates, so do an anti-rain dance. Drive out to your location, set up your tripod, point the camera at the sky, and find the brightest thing in the sky that will allow you to focus. My T5i has a focus feature that punches in a window around 10 times zoom and allows you to get focus. If you have a manual lens, turn the focus ring to the infinity mark and then pull back slightly or slightly before infinity. Now all you have to do is hit the shutter button and remove your hand from the camera and the tripod. The 2-second delay should kick in and it should snap the picture for whatever time you set your shutter to.
And there you go. You will need to fine tune the settings according to what your needs are. Increase the shutter speed, decrease it, increase the ISO, decrease it. The more you play around with it, the better feel you will get and the better overall picture you will take. As you start taking a couple pictures, you're going to realize that you won't get a super clean and clear, colorful image. This is normally achieved in editing after the fact. If your camera supports it, shoot in RAW format. This is an uncompressed image from the sensor packed with a lot more details than your normal JPEG. To edit them, you have a lot of choices. You got Adobe Lightroom, Photoshop. Obviously, those are paid programs, but you can also achieve it with GIMP. Canon has a digital professional utility that allows you to edit images. You can also use that. Heck, even your phone has a bunch of apps that allow you to edit RAW. My favorite is Snapseed. I'm going to be making a part 2 of this video with a bunch of editing tricks and techniques that will get the most out of the image. Until then, give it a sub or a like or a dislike. You know, you get to choose that kind of thing. Now, I'm going to be giving you a little bit more info about the 500 rule. I actually didn't know about this rule until I started making this video. But before, I did take a lot of pictures from the night sky. So it turns out that my Nifty 50 was a terrible lens for astrophotography. For example, I thought it would be an amazing lens because it's a 1.8 aperture. Once you account for the crop factor, 50 times 1.6, because it's a crop sensor. So it gives you around an 80mm focal length equivalent. And if you do this math, 500 divided by 80mm, you only get a 6.2 second max exposure before you get noticeable star streaking. And with this lens, I was actually setting it to like 20 or 15 seconds. And I never got a clean image. And I was like, whoa, what am I doing wrong? This sucks. I thought this lens was going to be amazing because it's a 1.8. Oh, but because of the focal length, it wasn't going to be a great fit. Plus, you don't really get to capture the Milky Way as much with this tight crop at 80mm. I think the best image I got was with my ultra wide, which only has an aperture of like 4, and I was able to get it at 10mm around 4 f-stop, and it was a significantly better image because I got to capture more of the arm of the Milky Way as opposed to just a tiny portion. Anyway, that was a little bit of a rant. You do your thing, sub, like, unlike, unsub, whatever. You do you.